Play.it, your favorite WCCO podcasts and more. Hear what you've been missing at Play.it.
We've always enjoyed our conversations with Dr. Paul Offit on a number of topics, including his books. A number of them have come out to wide variety of praise. Do You Believe in Magic? Came out in 2013. One's related to autism and vaccine in 2008 and 2010. Deadly Choices, How the Anti-Vaccine Movement Threatens Us All. Autism's False Prophets. Dr. Offit, his regular job is a pediatrician, specializes in infectious disease, an expert on vaccines, immunology, and virology. And he is with us to react to the latest from the future president, Donald Trump, on his comments about vaccines, his conversations with others that has caused Dr. Offit to be concerned. Once again, he's recently offered up a story in the Daily Beast about Mr. Trump's conversations with Andrew Wakefield and Robert Kennedy Jr. Dr. Offit, always a pleasure. Thank you. What concerns you most about this topic related to the future president?
Well, I mean, Donald Trump is not unique among parents in having questions about vaccine safety. That's fine. I think that if he has those questions, he's fortunate enough to live in a country that has an enormous amount of expertise on the subject. But instead of seeking out those experts, he seeks out two people, one of whom was Andrew Wakefield back in August, and now RFK Jr. Just a couple days ago. Mm-hmm. Who don't have that expertise, who frankly are conspiracy theorists that believe that vaccines cause problems that they don't cause. So I think he's missing an enormous opportunity.
You, in your story in the Daily Beast, laid out a couple people he should reach out to. Just talk about two of them and why you think they should be people that Mr. Trump should reach out to.
Well, Nancy Messonnier is the head of something called the National Center for Immunization and Respiratory Diseases at the CDC. She is in charge of a whole host of epidemiologists who are constantly evaluating vaccines once they're given to children to see whether or not they're safe and to make sure that they're effective, as they were shown to be in their pre-licensure studies. I mean, we're fortunate in this country to have something called the Vaccine Safety Data Link, which is this computerized linked medical record system where you can very quickly see whether or not there's a problem. And Nancy Messonnier would be the perfect person to talk to. But I haven't heard her name, or Stanley Plotkin, who's probably the world's foremost expert in vaccines, lives right here in Doylestown. It's not hard to get a hold of these people.
Does Andrew Wakefield have any credibility left?
No. He doesn't. He had a hypothesis that measles, mumps, rubella, or MMR vaccine caused autism. His hypothesis has been tested now in 17 separate studies in many countries on 3 different continents, 7 countries on 3 different continents, and everybody finds the exact same result. Yet he persists in this belief. I guess he just can't believe that he could ever be wrong.
So why do you think people still want to believe that Wakefield is right and the masses are wrong?
Because we don't know the cause of autism. I mean, it would be, yep. I mean, for example, if you look at diabetes, type 1 diabetes in the 1800s, there were all these sort of crazy notions about what caused them, all these crazy cures that people had for making your diabetes go away. And then in 1921, Banting and Best discovered insulin, and all of that went away. I think that would also be true here if we had a clear cause or causes of autism, but that doesn't seem to be, right around the corner.
And so how long has RFK Jr. been a part of this conversation about vaccines and raising some ideas that cause experts like you to shake your head?
He came in the early 2000s with the notion that thimerosal, this ethyl mercury containing preservative that was in vaccines, that frankly hasn't been in any vaccines given to children, young children, since 2001. He believed that mercury in that vaccine was causing autism. And again, there have been 7 studies that have looked at this question. He recently, in 2014, he published a book called Thimerosal, Let the Science Speak. Well, the science has spoken. The problem is that RFK Jr. refuses to believe the science because he, like Wakefield, believes there's this vast international conspiracy funded by pharmaceutical companies to hide the truth. It's cynical, it's wrong, yet obviously it has a certain appeal, sadly, to our president-elect.
So was it a mistake to have thimerosal in these medicines in the first place years ago?
No. If you look back in the 1920s and 30s when vaccines were given primarily in multi-dose vials, when you got to the 7th, 8th, or 9th dose, because you were constantly violating that rubber stopper, you could inadvertently introduce bacteria into that vial, bacteria which you would then inoculate into children, which could cause not just local abscesses, but could cause bloodstream infections, sepsis, and death. It wasn't until we put preservatives in vaccines that all of that went away. Although, I don't think there's ever going to be, the National Center for the Appreciation of Heavy Metals. The fact of the matter is that thimerosal, this ethylmercury-containing preservative, was a gentle bacteriostatic, agent, which is to say it decreased bacteria's ability to reproduce.
And is it still used in any way today?
Yes, it's still contained in some multi-dose preparations of influenza vaccine.
Well, I've asked you this before, but I still think it's worth noting because you have people listening right now who still believe that it might have been their second or third child, who knows, where their child was acting as typical as normal, and then something changed dramatically after some wave of vaccines, and that it wasn't right away that their children or their child showed a tendency, which eventually was diagnosed as somewhere on the autism spectrum. What do you say to those folks?
And so when, for example, there was this massive lawsuit against the federal government claiming that vaccines caused autism, what parents had was they had videos of their children, that they would take videos of their children at 2, 3, 4 months of age, a year of age, and they would make the claim that you just said, which is that my child was fine, then they got these vaccines, and then they regressed. But actually, when you showed those films in a blinded manner, actually, to people who were experts, like Eric von Bohn was one of the experts at that trial, he could show you who was developmentally abnormal well before the parents actually appreciated them as being developmentally abnormal. So the sentence or the statement, if you're autistic at 5, you're autistic at 2, you're autistic when you're born, is true.
So you're saying if experts were able to be around these childs and spend time, that those of us who are around the kids all the time but don't have the clinical background, the scientific background, that they would notice things that we would not, and maybe within the spectrum of understanding, we would see that if it was pointed out, and maybe we just would miss out on that because we're not trained in that area.
Yeah, there was actually a great study done by a researcher named Ami Klim when he was at Yale. He's at Emory now, but when he was at Yale, he did a study where he put children who were just a few weeks old in a chair where he could then watch their eye movements, and then he had the mother appear on the screen, and the mother would talk to the child. And what he would do, he would look at where the child was looking, and what he found was that children who were ended up being developmentally normal, who ended up being developmentally delayed but not autism, would always look at the mother's eyes when the mother talked. Children who eventually were diagnosed with autism virtually invariably looked at the mother's mouth. So there were very subtle signs early on, which is to say that that autistic child or child who was soon to be diagnosed with autism sort of saw the mother speaking more mechanistically than sort of looking into her eyes.
Paul Offit is with us. The doctor's joined us a number of times before. He's a pediatrician, especially in infectious diseases. He has written eloquently and very successfully on the top of vaccines and others. Among his books, Deadly Choices, How the Anti-Vaccine Movement Threatens Us All. What is the biggest concern you have as a doctor and as a citizen of this country about the anti-vaccine movement?
That it scares parents unnecessarily about vaccines, causes them to make bad decisions for their children, which put those children at unnecessary risk. There's not a year that goes by at our hospital, Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, where we don't see a child die from a vaccine-preventable disease. Most typically flu, occasionally pneumococcus or whooping cough. It'd be invariably because the parent chose not to vaccinate them, chose to put their children at risk because they were scared by what they'd read or heard. There's just a lot of bad information out there, and it does harm.
What power or where could this go if you have a president who believes in this anti-vaccine movement and surrounds himself in these positions of authority with other doubters? How powerful could this be over the next 4 to maybe 8 years?
Well, so there are 2 federal programs. One is the so-called Vaccine for Children's program, which was put in place in the early 1990s by the Clinton administration, which pays for children who are either uninsured or underinsured. They probably pay for about 55 to 60% of all vaccines that are given in this country. That's an entitlement program, and it's a federal program, that in theory could be overturned by Congress. That's possible. It would have to be Congress. It wouldn't be. It's a congressional mandate, not the executive branch. And there's something called the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program, which at least puts somewhat of a firewall up between, sort of civil litigation and the pharmaceutical companies. You really have to go through this court first. If you took that away and you let people go do what they did in the early 1980s, which is just bring this all into civil court, meaning bring, child's born with 6 fingers and you believe it was the vaccine that did it, and you put it in front of a jury. That would end vaccine manufacture in the United States. I can't imagine either of these things happen. I just think I'm choosing to believe, and maybe naively, that there are just too many smart people that would allow this to happen.
2 last points, and I'll let you go. I don't get the sense that you have enough people in the Congress who share these ideas that a bill could pass. Do you?
That a bill could pass.
Could pass that would fall in line with more of the anti-vaccine crowd.
No, I don't think so. It's one thing that's good to try and take the good news out of this. When RFKjr. met with Trump, I think if this was 15 years ago, you would have seen the media cover this much differently. Now, it's really been universally true that the media has come down against it. So I think that common wisdom has taken hold that children are suffering these decisions.
Would you make any changes whatsoever with the vaccine schedule at this point?
No. It's a well-tested, well-hewn schedule that's caused our children to live better, healthier, longer lives.
Thank you, sir. Always appreciate it.
Thank you.
Dr. Paul Offit, he knows this topic extraordinarily well, is backed by his research, is backed by scientists, and it should give people a lot of pause when people push back against this. This is not in any way to lessen the sympathy and the empathy anybody should have for individuals themselves on the autistic spectrum, or those who have loved ones in their life, maybe their kids. But let's deal with facts and reality as opposed to holding on to theories that have been proven false by this novel concept called science.
This is CCO.
I got a buddy, let's call him Bob. Hi, I'm John Williams. And Bob has 3 New Year's resolutions every year, and I hate